Let's get started. I have Brian Alfaro on the Capital Raisers show, man. How are you doing?
I'm living the dream, Ruben. It's a beautiful day here in Houston. The weather is nice. It's not too hot. We've got a property under contract, going on vacation. I don't know what's there left to complain about.
Okay, so 506B or 506C?
Oh, come on, man. It's a C. This isn't my first rodeo.
All right. All
We're
right.
talking about it,
Cool.
right?
Well, I get a lot of people that play their cards incorrectly, but I'm really happy to hear that we can chat about these types of things. And for the Facebook Live audience, it's not into capital raising. We have this dilemma where we have to file for exemptions because we're treated like securities, and we are allowed to talk about our deals or not, depending on how we file and treat ourselves as businesses. But we are allowed to talk about your property, which is going to be cool for the audience that has no idea anything about multifamily, the business we refer to as the syndication business. This is going to be a good time. So we got Brian on here. Brian, let's talk a little bit about your background and how you got into real estate syndication, particularly multifamily syndication.
Absolutely. Yeah. First of all, appreciate you having me on the show.
Yeah,
I always
man.
enjoy having a conversation with you, Ruben. It's always a pleasure. So my trajectory has been very similar to probably some people you've had on the show. I started in the single family space. I started doing that in 2018. I really went down the rabbit hole, just learning all the tricks of the trade of the single family space. So a lot of people talk about BRRRR, buying rentals, flipping houses, wholesaling. I kind of tried to stick as many tools as I could in my belt because I wanted to be able to take down a deal when I found one, when every deal is a little bit different. So I didn't know what I didn't know at the time. And I was just reading a bunch of books. I was on Bigger Pockets. I was listening to podcasts. I was talking to local people. And I had a very limiting mindset, I like to tell people, because mindset is so important in this business. It sounds cheesy, but it really, really is. But I didn't know what I didn't know. And based on the mindset that I had, I looked at how many dollars are in my bank account. That's 20% of certain property. And that was sort of my plan. Just save money, go buy properties. A little bit later, I learned about private money and hard money and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, I was keeping it very simple because it was the easiest way to get into real estate. It was a low barrier to entry. Just go out there and find a rental property either to keep for yourself or to flip. So I did that for about 18 months. I had my realtor's license as well, and I was dipping my toes in the transactional side, did some wholesale deals, had some rentals, helped some friends that were going on, doing some flips and different things. And I realized very quickly that I do not like that business. If there's anything wrong with single family, I know lots of people that have built tremendous wealth through it. And I think it's a great business model, but it didn't match my personal goals that I was trying to accomplish. As somebody with a business background, I'm a small business owner. I have a business degree, and I'm always looking for things that can scale, not because I want to own a massive company necessarily, but it was really about getting that time freedom. And if you're too small, you're really buying yourself a job, which is what it is, right? So I started to look into, I knew about multifamily already, and the goal was already 50, 60 doors was kind of my goal. If when I bought 50 or 60 rental houses, I would be able to like sort of scale into multifamily. That was a story I was telling myself. But 2019, late 2019, early 2020, once I realized I wasn't enjoying it, COVID hit, which also sort of became a blessing in disguise in March of 2020, because it really forced me to slow down. I had to stop thinking about everything that was going on between my coffee shop business and between my single family business. And I really decided, like, if I'm going to take a leap and dive into commercial real estate, dive into multifamily real estate with the focus on syndication and scaling, that I needed to do it now because I had time to read. I had time to network on Zoom, I had time to listen to podcasts, do everything you needed to do to get educated. And then I also eventually ended up joining a multifamily mentorship group.
Who?
I'm in the Jake and Gino program.
Yeah, shout out to Jake and Gino.
Yeah, definitely great program. Highly recommend if you want to be surrounded by a group of guys that are just making it happen, as we like to say. They're just good people. So join that group, met my two partners, Cody and John. I think you've had Cody on the show before. Yep. I joined them in late July, early August of 2020, last year, right in the middle of COVID. And we spent all last year just building our brand, building our network of both active partners and passive partners, people that want to passively invest in either our deal or other people's deals. And I guess you can say the rest is history.
Your database and the people that you're hanging out with. Tell me about building this up before we go into some other areas. So I had your partner Cody on, I forget what episode it was, but he had never raised a single dime and had never syndicated a single deal when he came on. And now you guys are like taking off and taking down deals in Houston and partnering with George Abreu on occasion and, and looking to potentially become your own deal sponsors. But I kind of want to talk about this particular aspect of the capital raising business, which is the building of your brand and the marketing and the communication and education and nurturing of investors and building that database so that you can help people invest into something that is typically not available to the general American public. Tell me about this process. I know you got a coffee shop background or coffee business background. Tell me about the marketing side and what you're doing to build this particular database of people that you would consider as potential people that you can help in the multifamily business.
Absolutely. That's a great question, Ruben. It's one we get pretty often. And I think the place I always like to start is to remind people that no matter what you're doing, you're always selling something and you're always marketing something. It so happened to be for me, prior to doing multifamily, I was marketing coffee shops or restaurants, whatever industry I was in. And whether you're coming from an office setting or whatever, you're selling yourself to your potential manager, your boss, your client. So marketing is super important in the multifamily space as well, because what we like to say is if people don't know who you are and what you do, you don't exist. If you're not on the internet, if you're not on Facebook, if you're not on Instagram, if you're not on LinkedIn, if you're not sort of building your brand, you get hard to find. And there's so many people out there
Yeah.
that are doing that. You've got some phenomenal marketers that, here in Houston, we always look at guys like Robert Martinez at Rockstar Capital. He's got like 300 or 400,000 Instagram followers. You've got the Uncle G's, right? You've got the Grant Cardones that are just dominating the real estate marketing space. Jorge Abreu over at Elevate does a phenomenal job as well, right? So these guys are building traction, not strictly because of their marketing, but it's definitely helping because people know what business they're in. They're not guessing what these guys are doing for a living. So whether you're looking to find active partners, people that call you and say, hey, man, I got a deal. I need some help with the capital raise. Or I've got a bunch of capital. Do you have a deal? That's the active side of marketing. People seeing you active, they call you for that stuff. And the other way around too, right? If you're a passive investor and you're looking to get into real estate, but you don't want to do any of the work and you want to bet on the jockey, you like what's going on with the group. You feel like they've got a good brand presence. They're well known in the industry. The content they put out is very valuable to you. You feel like they're helping educate not only you, but the community in general. Then that's somebody you would want to be potentially interested in passively investing with because you have an alignment in your investing thesis. But unless you're marketing all that stuff and you're telling the world who it is, what you do, then you're going to have a hard time getting started in this business. And we had Dan Hanford on our podcast, who I'm sure you're very familiar with.
Yep.
He asked us a great question on the first time he was on. He talks about the investor triangle, the triad, the know, like, and trust. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he asked, like, which one do you think is more important? And 9 out of 10 people will tell you it's trust because you don't give money to somebody you don't trust. And he says it's not trust, it's know. If people don't know you, they can't like you. And if they don't like you, they can't trust you. So that know part, that marketing part is so important to anybody who's looking to be in the multifamily space. Even if you're not syndicating and you're JVing on smaller deals, I always tell people, eventually everybody runs out of money. So you want to find some partners out there, and being active online and marketing is a great way to do that.
Shout out Dan Hanford. Love all of your content. Probably I'm most inspired by the fact that you are probably the best marketer that I know of anybody. You're awesome. A great syndicator, dude, but you are phenomenal at marketing.
Agreed.
All right. So you were talking about hanging out with active people, hanging out with passive people. A lot of people in the capital raising business are really focused on communicating and building a relationship with limited partners. Me personally, while I do some of that, I spend a lot more time hanging out with active investors, bringing capital raisers into my fund. When you're talking about hanging out with active investors, what's the purpose? Do you bring some active investors into your deals? Do you bring capital raisers into your deals? Let's start with that question.
Yeah, that's also a great question. I think there's a variety of answers for that. One is definitely something to note is a lot of active investors are also passive investors. So just keep that in mind, because if you're an active sponsor and you're doing a lot of deals, you probably have quite a bit of liquidity, and it's nice to put your money to work in somebody else's deal too. Sometimes that's an important part. Two, yes, the second part about finding those deals, our goal for our investors who trust us and want to invest at Blue Oak Capital is we want to keep them engaged. We want to make sure they always have an opportunity to invest in throughout the year. It doesn't mean there's an offering 365 days a year, but we don't want large gaps where, let's say we put an offering out in January and there's not another offering until November. You go like 8, 9, 10 months with no deal. It's very easy to be forgotten about in this space. You don't want to be forgotten about. You want to stay engaged with your investors. And a great way to do that If you have people in your network who are active, who are actually finding quality, good deals, and that have that experience, they have that track record, you have a relationship with them because you've been hanging out with them, as we've been talking about. Why not partner with them? Why not come on as a co-sponsor or co-GP, help with some equity raising, help with some asset management, do what you told your investors you were going to do, and that's provide them quality offering opportunities, whether you're the lead sponsor or not. So that's another reason we hang out with active investors. And then the third one I would say is definitely just to be well connected so that when we do sponsor our own deals, we want to sort of have a bunch of bat phones to pick up if we need some help, if we need somebody to come in and help raise some equity, or we have an asset management call. Having those strong relationships with those people that are already where you want to be one day, that's really, really important to us.
This is it's a relationship business. So I kind of want to talk about this particular formation or this particular part of the business, which is raising capital and doing so from co-GPs. We do it through making people partners of our funds, but the co-GP is essentially very similar, right? You're bringing co-GPs. The only difference is that they have to have an ongoing duty within the operation side of the business. But tell me about, how many times have you done this? You already mentioned that this is something that you're seeking to do into the future, but how does this whole thing happen? Like for somebody that's like, hey, maybe I have like 500,000 because I've been in the real estate, commercial real estate, either insurance or sales side or whatever kind of ancillary kind of business. And I have all these people that have money and they've been very familiar with me over the last 20 years. I think I kind of want to move on to the GP or syndication side of things instead of just getting paid a commission for my services. I think I want to partner with somebody like Brian. What do they do in order to become partners with you? What does that look like? How does the negotiation process begin?
And that's such an important part to understand is how the whole thing gets structured. And step one is exactly what you said and alluded to a minute ago, is it's the relationship part. We are not operators who blast out 30 emails, 40 emails or more to just like a group of people that are quote capital raisers that we have not had a relationship with. We don't want to, just because you have $2, $3, $4 million ready to go, if we don't have an alignment of interests in both our short-term business plan, our long-term business plan, how we look at the assets, the underwriting, sort of just the financial modeling, it's not going to work. And it's going to cause more frustration and it's going to end up wasting a bunch of people's time, which we don't want. And you and I both know that time is of the essence when you're doing these deals. They get put together very fast. And even though it seems like 60 or 90 days for a closing process is pretty slow, at least compared to like residential where it's 30 days or less, time moves very fast when you're in these things,
Yeah.
right? And the windows close very quickly.
Oh yeah.
Establishing that relationship is the most important part. And it's the step one for us. So if somebody approaches us and says, hey, they're a capital raiser or they're interested in placing some capital, even if they're an operator where they just has some capital they need to place, we just want to get on a call with them. We want to go what we call like going through the exercise. We'll say, hey, let us show you one of the deals that we've done, or let us show you one of the deals we got in best and final on, but missed just by a little bit. Or like right now we're sponsoring our own deal that we're about to launch pretty soon.
Congrats, dude.
Yeah.
That's your first, you're the full-blown sponsor, or
That's
like
right.
the lead
That's right.
sponsor. This is your first lead sponsor one?
Correct.
Awesome, dude. That's amazing.
Yeah, thank you. We're excited. So in order to have that happen, you have to have that relationship. We want to know that there's an alignment there and that you like us, we like you, the no part, right? First of all, are you just a good person? Do you have good morals, good integrity? Are you professional? Do you carry yourself well? Because what people don't always remember is that when you're partnering with somebody, even on a co-GP side, is you're getting in bed with somebody from a branding standpoint too. So if like Blue Oak Capital had a really bad reputation, investors didn't like us, or vendors didn't like us, brokers didn't like us, lenders didn't like us, and you start aligning with us, then you got to be careful about that, right? Because it could be bad for your brand potentially. So that relationship part and understanding who's on the other side of the table is super important to us. Once we have that, like I said, we want to go through the exercise to make sure that you guys, under the capital raisers or the other operators, understand how we do business, how we operate, how we sort of do things. And then at that point, it just becomes a waiting game where it's like, okay, let me know when you have a deal, or we'll let you know when we have a deal. And we want to engage people usually pretty early, because nobody likes the phone call. And I'm sure you've gotten these, and we definitely have. Nobody likes the phone call like, hey, can you raise $2 million in like 7 days? Nobody wants that. Nobody likes that. And even if the answer was yes, why would you intentionally sign up for that? Because it's so much stress. And you don't want to be the guy with that weight on your shoulders that the deal won't close if you miss it by maybe you only raise 1.7 or something, right? It's still pretty good, but maybe it wasn't enough. So we try to get people engaged early. So, for
Yeah,
example, if we have an
so crucial.
LOI accepted, we're going to start reaching out to somebody who we might be interested in partnering with on the co-GP side and say, hey, we just got an LOI accepted. Here's everything we have. Here's the CoStar report. Here is the T12. Here's the rent roll. Here's our underwriting. Feel free to do all your due diligence on your own, underwrite it yourself, and then let's get on a call and talk about it. So we'll get on a call, we'll go through everything. And if it makes sense for them, and they feel like they can commit a significant amount of equity into us, that's probably, let's call it 500K or more,
Hmm.
then let's keep the door open. And if our offer gets accepted or our PSA gets executed, let's go, let's move forward, let's start raising capital. So, and it works the other way around too. If we get a call from somebody that said, okay, we just put our property under contract, we're going through PSA, or we just did PSA, we want to be personally engaged as early as possible, because what we don't want is we don't want to be brought in late in the process when the
Right.
property's been active on capital raising, say for 30, 45 days, and we're
That's
sort of
right.
playing emergency duty, because that gets really challenging and we'd want to be engaged early so we don't have to feel like we're rushed. But from a co-GP standpoint, we ask for ourselves, if we're the co-GP, we want to be involved in asset management. That's really, really important to us, because not only do we want to learn, but our investors are trusting us with their equity, with their capital. And we want to be able to have a say in what's going on and some influence as well. And we do the same for anybody who comes on our deals. So if you're a co-GP for Blue Oak Capital and you're bringing 500K, $1 million, we're going to do the same thing. You're going to be on all the asset management calls. You're going to have some say and influence on what's going on. At the end of the day, of course, we're the lead sponsor, so we control what's going on, but we value our relationships and we want to make sure we're listening to everybody who comes to the table. So that's basically the structure and how it's worked on the ones that we've been in as a co-GP. And that's the same opportunity we're offering for others.
All right. So tell me more about your business model. What is it when you went from coffee shops to single families and then got into syndication? You went to Jake and Gino. How did you decide exactly what you wanted to do? Did you decide on like A class cash flowing from day one, big assets in big markets? Did you say, hey, we can make a bigger back end profit for our investors if we do heavy lift or heavy value add? How did you decide exactly what specialty within the multifamily asset class to dig your heels into?
It has actually changed over the course of, let's call it 18 months since COVID. You and I both know that prices have rapidly increased, and things that we thought were too expensive 18 months ago, I hit my head on the wall every day that I didn't buy it, because it's now like $20,000 or $30,000 a door more today than it was 2019 or early 2020. So because of that, the markets we're focusing on for our own deals, where we're the lead sponsor, are Houston, San Antonio primarily. We'd like Texas, so we're interested in some other markets around DFW or Waco. There's some other great markets in Texas, but I would say a large part of our deal flow is from Houston and San Antonio. So knowing that prices have rapidly increased here, that means that cash flow has also decreased. The spreads have gotten thinner and thinner, where the spread between, call it a C class property and an A class property here in Houston it's really marginal is
Hmm.
where I'm at. So especially on your cap rates, your cap rates between your A class and your cap rates between your C class, the delta is not as big as it used to be, where there was this very large difference between buying a value add property here in Houston than buying an A class, or let's call it a B plus class, something that's stabilized, ready to go, cash flowing day one. So we pivoted our business model a little bit. Not that we were exclusively focused on only buying heavy lifts, heavy value adds, but over the last, I would call it's definitely been this year, so call it 6 to 8 months, we really decided to focus heavily on, call it the B plus, if not what I like to call the value A class. It's not the luxury high rise with 500 units. We like the more boutique style value A class, meaning it's still A class. It's built, call it 2015 to 2020, but the rents are below market, and it was built, but it doesn't have all the bells and whistles that some of the luxury A class have. That's going to be your smart home technology. That's going to be your smart locks, your Nest thermostats, or your Ecobees, or whatever decide to put in there. And some of the other essentially amenities that young professionals really, really like, because we're a society of convenience, right? Especially now that we're sort of getting through COVID, people have really realized that they like all these amenities in their unit, even in their home. I know in my house, I've got smart locks and smart garage door openers and smart thermostats. And, I'm talking to,
That's a big trend, that whole technology into your buildings.
it is, yeah. So we've really pivoted to focusing on the lighter value add, I'll call it, where you're looking at, it's called B or B plus properties. Stuff that's a little bit newer, it's usually going to be no older than the 80s, but realistically, most of the stuff we're looking at is probably 90s and 2000s and up. We want to see an opportunity where there's still cash flow, there's still value add opportunity, but it's not, we always say we're adding value through operations and amenities, not through renovations. So it doesn't mean we're not doing any CapEx. We're still doing CapEx where needed, but we're not going in there because these are newer properties. We don't have to completely gut the units and spend $15,000, $20,000 a unit for carpet, paint, flooring, redoing rooms, redoing all the kitchens, redoing all the restrooms. We're focusing on improving the service, providing that A-class sort of resort style amenities and the service that people expect, and just providing all those luxury things I was talking about, whether it's, super nice closets, thermostats, locks, covered parking, garages, things like that. So that's how we pivoted our business plan this year. And it was strictly because we noticed if you're getting a 6.5 or 7% cash on cash return on a B plus A minus asset, or you can go do a heavy lift and get set called 7.5 or 8% cash on cash, is that execution risk of executing your CapEx plan, call it, $1, $2, $3 million of CapEx. Is that execution risk worth it based on where we're at in the market cycle? That's a question that gets answered differently by every operator. I'm not saying we're right and value add people are wrong or heavy lift people are wrong. It's just our personal investing thesis. And based on a lot of the investors we're connected to in our database, we've heard a lot of things that a lot of people are sort of uncertain where we're at in the market cycle. And those really big heavy lift plays, while they may be attractive from a number standpoint, you're going to have potentially higher returns. There's also execution risk involved with the CapEx and with the way things have been going with labor and material shortages and material expenses. We personally decided we did not want to necessarily focus on those types of opportunities. Now, if we find a great one, of course, we're going to definitely take a look at it. We're trying to pivot what our bread and butter is.
I'm curious about the Blue Oak team. Who's on there? What do you guys do? What does each person do?
So it definitely takes a team to make this business go. I always tell people, if you don't have a partner, at least one, or depending on what you're doing, it's hard. It's a lot of work. It's an insane amount of work, to be honest. It's more work than I've ever done. It's something that you don't want to do yourself, especially if you're trying to build a brand and you're trying to build a business. If you're trying to buy, these little 4 units or 8 units, things like that, you can totally do it by yourself, self-manage, cash flow, enjoy it, and you're good. But if you're trying to scale it, you definitely want some partners. So there's 3 of us over at Blue Oak, and Cody Laughlin, who you said was on your show earlier before we even, we even started building momentum. He's our acquisitions manager. So he's doing everything from talking to brokers, talking to vendors, the capital markets team, just talking to everybody you need to know to basically take down a deal, right? He's leading the forefront on making sure that it's a good property, it's a good deal, and everything makes a lot of sense. Me personally, I handle the investor relations and the marketing and sort of the back end stuff for making sure that our funnels are constantly moving. So by funnels, I'm talking about finding other active partners and then also finding other passive investors, putting out content. So making sure our podcast, making sure our newsletter, making sure our blog, making sure our webinars are out there, making sure our meetup is building traction. I want to see the numbers increasing over time. So that's really my focus. And then our third partner, John, who's sort of the guy in the shadows, I like to say, he's not as forefront as Cody and I. He handles our operations. So he's doing a lot of our bookkeeping, our accounting, making sure everything is tidied up on the back end to keep Blue Oak Capital going. And then he's handling sort of the other tasks Cody and I sometimes get stretched thin on. So he's talking to investors. He's got his network of investors. He's helping with analyzing properties and underwriting if we get to a stage where we're really serious about things. So we all wear a lot of hats, I like to say, but when at the end of the day, we try to stay in our lane to make sure that we can specialize in what we're good at.
Okay, so Blue Oak is going into their first lead GP position, sponsor position in a deal, a light value add property. So who's going to handle the construction? I'm curious about this. Like when you're going from co-GP status to GP status, there's new things that you have to incorporate into your team. I kind of want to probe for the people that are doing the same thing, that are going from co-GP to I want to be my full-blown GP and run this whole thing. What are the pieces that are typically missing or that you have implemented or brought onto your team to help you? Who are those guys? What do they do?
To be honest, I feel like we've been ready to be a GP for some time now, our lead sponsor. And I can't say enough kind words or good things about Cody because he's so well connected in the space. If you follow Cody at all, he knows everybody. I always used to joke when I first got connected in the Jake and Gino program, and then I joined Cody and John at Blue Oak right after they formed it. I would meet somebody new and exciting I was really excited to connect with, and then I would find out early in the conversation that they've already talked to Cody. So I always got disappointed that I wasn't meeting anybody new because Cody knew everybody. So for us, I feel like we've been ready to be a lead sponsor. And what does ready even mean? By ready, I mean we have sort of a Rolodex of people ready to go. We're well connected, is what I like to say. When we have a problem, we know who to call, because that's really what we're doing as real estate professionals. Is we're problem solvers. You're either solving a problem for a tenant, or you're solving a problem for a seller who wants to sell their property, or you're solving a problem for a passive investor who's got capital they need to put to work. So it's the same thing when you're taking down your own deal. You have to ask yourself, are you well connected enough with enough people on your team, not only personally like at Blue Oak, but do you have the right vendors in place? Who's on your construction side? Do you have plan A, plan B, plan C? Who is your title company? Do you have plan A, plan B, plan C? Who are you going for your capital, the debt market? Are you talking to CBRE? Are you talking to Greystone? Are you talking to Old Capital? Who are you going to for your debt? Property management. Who's your A, B, and C? You got to have that sort of like that Rolodex, as I was saying, of people to call, so that when you finally have a deal, it's just go time. You have that checklist. Okay, here we go. We're ready to go. So I think that for us, having those systems in place, having the checklist ready to go, and then having A, B, and C, or 1, 2, and 3 for each one of those things you really need to get a deal done, has been super valuable for us. And then also, at the end of the day, you don't know what you don't know. So what's really important to us is we try to always partner with somebody on our team that has significant experience. So on this deal, for example, that we are working on right now that we haven't quite launched, so I don't want to speak too much about it, but our KP and one of the GPs on our team has over 3,400 units. This is somebody who's well connected, who can help us get across the finish line should we stumble. Now, we don't feel like we're going to stumble, but if for some reason we do, he's going to make sure that we don't trip along the way, because he's got capital in the deal, he's got equity in the deal that's at risk as well, and he's got a reputation. Everybody knows this guy. So he doesn't want to burn any bridges by not partnering with us visibly and then not closing the deal. So that's really important to us as well. And it gives confidence to our investors. So I always tell people being a co-GP is great. But if you do want to take the leap and be a full GP, you got to make sure you have all your resources ready to go, because time is of the essence when you're doing these things, and you want to make sure you have everybody on your team.
There's some people that would never want full GP. I'm one of those people that I don't want to be a GP. I just want to handle the marketing and I'll walk the properties and have underwriters come check it out, and I'll go raise the capital, but I don't want to do property management or managing property managers. I don't want to deal with the construction or the acquisitions. I'll look at the deal and underwrite it. But you said something very beautiful. Is like, when you're going to be a GP in this particular deal, you're bringing on somebody with a great track record, with a lot of experience. I'm curious about managing the people that are going to do the rehab and like putting those pieces in place. Are you leaning on this particular partner of yours to help with that, or are you guys forming that on your own? Tell me more a little bit about that.
Yeah, the great news about these light value add properties. So this property that we're looking at it's only about 4 years old. So to say there's a construction element to it would be a false statement. There really isn't. It would really just be light things. Like, for example, this property doesn't have backsplashes in the kitchen. You can get somebody to do that, a subcontractor or somebody even on site sometimes that can do that by themselves. So for stuff like that, that's really small. We actually lean on our preferred property manager. So we'll say, hey, property manager that we like working with, that we've been building a relationship with now for years, who's your go-to for these types of things? We're trying to install backsplashes in all units, and they'll have a list of vendors. Here's your A, B, and C. And these guys, property managers, I always tell people, there's two people that are your best friends in multifamily. First one's your lender, because they're the biggest partner in the deal. You want to be in good with your lender. One of the other most important ones, besides obviously your passive investors, is going to be your property manager, because you got to hold them accountable, of course, to executing your business plan. But if you hire the right property manager, somebody who didn't just wake up yesterday and decide, like, I'm going to manage some properties today, they're well connected. They really know everybody in the city. They know who to call. If you need something, they pick up. You call somebody, they tell you no, and then they call and they tell that guy yes, because they're so well connected and they provide so much business to a lot of these contractors, plumbers, electricians, vendors, carpenters, that when the property manager calls, you better say yes. These property managers have a lot of leverage, especially if you're using one that's of good scale. So we lean on them for those light value add CapEx stuff. And if we want to bring in a heavier value add, a heavier CapEx project, we have great relationships with somebody like Jorge at Elevate Commercial Investment Groups, right? We've done a couple of deals with him now. And if we were trying to execute $1 million, $2 million CapEx budget, he's going to be one of our first calls. We want him to be able to add value to us by bringing that, not only that experience, but the quality of work. Now that we've done a couple of deals with him, George does great work with his construction. He doesn't cut corners. So that's important to us. And then of course we have a couple other people lined up as well that are here local in the Texas area that if we want to get a bid from, we'll go to them as well.
Very cool. All right, man, let's jump into the lightning round. I'm going to start with this question. What's the best vacation you've ever taken?
I've been on quite a few vacations, so which is funny because as a young person, I didn't travel. I don't think I started traveling until I was 18. Just I come from a very blue collar background. My parents could not afford to travel when I was a kid. So I didn't start traveling until I was 18. And one of the first things I did before I was married was I used to travel a lot by myself, which a lot of people think is kind of weird. Why wouldn't you go with your friends or whatever? And I'm like, no, traveling by yourself is awesome because you're not holding yourself accountable to any expectations. You don't have to be Brian, the coffee shop manager. You don't have to be Brian, the multifamily investor. You can just be some dude. You can change your name if you want to, and nobody's going to even know. Right? So it's great. So, I mean, I've been on several trips. I think the first one I went to that was super memorable, I went to New York City by myself. And that was like the first big trip that I took. I don't even remember when that was. That was probably 2008, maybe 2009. So I was in my early 20s and I had never traveled outside of Texas. And I was just like, you know what? I'm going to go to New York City because why not? Right. There's nothing really holding me back. So that was definitely a very memorable trip for me. And then with my wife, we've been on several great trips and we've definitely had some memorable ones on our cruise. Our honeymoon cruise was phenomenal. And we're about to go on another one. So that's going to be a lot of fun as well.
Favorite book of any kind?
Favorite book is going to be Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. That's both business, just life in general. That I can talk about that book for a while, but that's my favorite one. What
is the best way to raise capital from your perspective?
Build relationships.
Yeah, baby. That's
period.
How long do you want to live?
As long as they'll let me. I would say if I could live into my mid 80s, early 90s, that'd be awesome.
What's your favorite aspect of being a multifamily investor?
Connecting with people from all different backgrounds. You talk to people that are engineers, ITs. We come from so many walks of life. There are so few people that actually start multifamily, like 18 out of high school jump in. So everybody's coming from somewhere, and that's my favorite part.
Do your spiritual philosophies have anything to do with your success in business?
I like to think so. I treat people like I want to be treated, and going to church for me and my wife is super important in building strong relationships in the community. So I definitely think that's had an impact in my success for sure.
The golden rule, baby. Do you have any hacks for breaking through limiting beliefs?
Change your network. If you have limiting beliefs, it's probably because you're surrounding yourself with people that have limiting beliefs and are telling you can't do something, or just providing that aura of just limiting yourself. So I always say, I want to be the dumbest person in the room and the not wealthiest person in the room. Surround yourself with people who are where you want to be, and it'll help change your mindset.
Have you ever experienced a miracle or had a near-death experience?
No near-death experiences for sure, which is I'm fortunate of. I would say it's definitely a miracle anytime you get to help bring little ones into the world. So I don't have any kids yet, but my wife's sister, so my sister-in-law has 3 beautiful boys, and being there right when they're born, that right when they allow the family to come in, that's just a phenomenal experience, getting to hold the little one who just welcomed into this world.
I love that answer. Tell me something that you are afraid of.
I'm not afraid of like any particular thing per se, but I would say I'm afraid of doing all this hard work and then having nothing to show for it. So, I'm highly motivated every day to give it my best to make sure that I leave something behind for my future family.
Favorite childhood memory?
When I was a kid, we went to New Jersey. My mom's from New Jersey when I was probably 10. So that was the first time I'd ever left the state of Texas. And I didn't leave again until I went to New York, like I mentioned earlier. So that's probably a really impactful childhood memory to realize that not everywhere is like Texas. Southern hospitality is a thing and it does not exist everywhere.
Right. Wow. Okay. What do you love about being in the coffee business?
I think there's something special about providing somebody with a beverage that is essentially a connecting mechanism. So a coffee is a medium, is what we tell people. It's kind of like alcohol. Like, why do you drink alcohol? Well, yeah, maybe some people want to feel pretty good about themselves, but at the end of the day, you do it to socialize. Usually you want to do it with friends and family, and coffee is very similar, where people come to you, they're not awake yet, and you get to hit them with that awesome customer service, that smile, provide them with a beverage that's going to help pick them up for the rest of the day or help pick them up midday. So I would say that's probably my favorite part about the coffee experience, is just getting to connect with people and leave that impactful impression that hopefully helps them have a better day.
Fascinating. I'll never think of coffee the same way. What kind of impact would you like to leave in the world?
My big motivating why, I always say my purpose is to definitely serve others. That's what I believe I was put on this earth for, is just to serve other people. So if at the end of the day at my funeral, when they're, talking about me and other people are standing up and talking about me, I want everybody to say good things about what I did for them. And I just want to leave a good example behind. My wife and I are praying for a family here soon, but even if for some reason we weren't able to have a family, just other people that sort of look up to me, whether it's nieces, nephews, just other people in our family, showing them like, look, here's what can be done, not only from a financial standpoint, the money's not so much as important, but here's what can be done when you really set your mind to something. So I just want to leave that sort of life-changing legacy behind.
Awesome answers on the lightning round. Thanks for entertaining us on that part of the show. Brian, how does the audience get a hold of you, my friend?
I'm easy to find. If you want to find me, I'm pretty active on Facebook. Just search my name or go to the Blue Oak Capital Facebook page. You'll see me on there as well. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. It's been a big priority for me since I got into multifamily, just being active on there. You can also email me directly at Brian, BRIAN, at blueoakinvests with an S at the end.com. I will definitely reply to your email if you send one as well. That's 3 easy ways to get a hold of me.
Cool, brother. We have a couple minutes left, man. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your podcast and your podcasting experience. Tell me about it.
The podcast has been so impactful in our multifamily business. We get this question quite often, like, man, why should I really start a podcast? There's like 100 other people doing a podcast on multifamily. And we tell people, yes, you still should, because there's so many good reasons. So first of all, you have to realize that you're adding value to the real estate community, and everybody has a different audience. Your audience is different than my audience. And there might be some crossover, but it's not like everybody who listens to my show also listens to your show and vice versa. And secondly, you're going to really build your network by having a podcast as well. So there is some selfish intent there as well, because there's really, really awesome guests that have been on both of our shows that just respectfully probably wouldn't just allow us to pick their brains, so to speak. But if you ask them to come on a podcast and talk to you for 45 minutes, guess what you get to do? You get to pick their brain. There's some selfish intent there. We've talked to Dan Hanford, we've talked to Neil Bawa, we've talked to Rod Cleef, like we've talked to some big operators that we get to talk to for an hour. So there's some selfish intent there, but you're also adding value to your listeners who you can then go repurpose that content to help you nurture and add value to other people, so that if we're talking to a new passive investor who has never passively invested before and they have a question, guess what? One of our favorite things to do is be like, "Oh, I have an answer for that." But first, why don't you listen to episode 37, where our special guest so-and-so talks about this very intently. Go ahead and listen to that episode, and let's get on a call to chat. So you get to show proof and authority that you are an educator in the space. And that's a really powerful tool that you just can't underestimate. So the podcasting has been phenomenal. We love it. We're about to release our 100th episode here pretty soon, and it grows very fast. So we're excited about 2022 with it.
What's the name of your show and how do they find it?
Yeah. So our name of our show is usually me and Cody, but sometimes John's on there, where it's the Prosperity Through Multifamily Real Estate Investing Podcast. If you follow me on Facebook or LinkedIn, or you email me, I'll be sure to put you on our alert list. So you get an alert via email when a new episode comes out, and then you'll see me posting about it all the time. So it's easy to find.
Fantastic. Any last words of wisdom for the aspiring multifamily investor or capital raiser?
I would say just be ready to not be afraid of hard work. It takes 12, 18, 24 months to get into your first deal, but there's something to be said about being consistent and learning to push through, even though some people tell you no. So don't be afraid of hard work. And then remember that this is a relationship-based business. A lot of people fizzle out in this business because they put their intent first versus others. Real estate is a get rich slow game, I like to tell people. So build good relationships first, and you'll find that your success will come both financial and other means as well.
Brian, you're a badass, dude. Love your partner, Cody. Really looking forward to following your progress, keeping a close eye on you, and potentially, if we really get to know each other, potentially working together with you guys in the future. It's been an honor to have you on the show, man. Thank you for coming on. Enjoy the rest of your day, my friend.
You too, man. Appreciate you having me on. Always enjoy listening to the show. So definitely looking forward to staying in touch. We'll figure out a way to do a deal together one day soon.